Hello there, dear listener. My name is Margaret, and I'm 70 years old. I've lived through 7 decades of joy, sorrow, triumph, and heartbreak. I've raised children, buried a husband, built a career, and watched the world change in ways I never could have imagined when I was young. But today, I want to share with you a story that surprised even me. A story about finding love when you least expect it, at an age when most people think romance is just a memory. This is a story about my dear friend Cordelia Whitmore, whom I met 5 years ago at our local library's book club. It's a tale of second chances, of courage in the face of loneliness, and of the remarkable discovery that our hearts never truly age, no matter how many birthdays we've celebrated. It's about learning that love after 60 comes with its own unique challenges and extraordinary rewards. Before I begin, let me tell you why I'm sharing this story. Too many of us believe that once we reach a certain age, once we've been widowed or divorced, once our children are grown and gone, that chapter of our lives, the chapter about romance and companionship, is permanently closed. Cordelia's story taught me, and I hope it will teach you, that this simply isn't true. Love doesn't have an expiration date, and neither do we. So settle in, pour yourself a cup of tea, and let me tell you about Cordelia's unexpected journey back to love. Cordelia Whitmore had been staring at the same page of her book for 20 minutes, the words swimming together like tadpoles in a pond. It wasn't that the novel was boring, quite the contrary. It was a gripping mystery by her favorite author. The problem was the silence. At 64, Cordelia had been a widow for 3 years, ever since Harold passed away from a sudden heart attack while tending to his prized tomatoes. The house they had shared for 38 years still felt too big, too quiet, despite her efforts to fill it with the sounds of classical music and talk radio. But it was the dinner table that haunted her most, specifically the empty chair across from her, where Harold used to sit, gesturing wildly with his fork as he recounted his day at the hardware store. "You're being ridiculous, Cordelia," she said aloud, her voice echoing in the kitchen. She had taken to talking to herself lately just to hear a human voice. Harold wouldn't want you moping around like this. And he wouldn't. Harold had been the kind of man who embraced life with both arms, who laughed loudly at his own jokes and cried openly at sad movies. "Live, Cordelia," he had whispered during his final moments in the hospital. "Promise me you'll really live." She promised, but keeping that promise was proving harder than she had anticipated. The doorbell rang, startling her from her thoughts. Through the peephole, she saw her neighbor, Vance Millicent, holding what appeared to be a casserole dish. Vance was 71, a retired postal worker whose wife had passed away 6 months ago. They had nodded politely to each other over the years, but had never really conversed beyond pleasantries about the weather. "Hello, Vance," she said, opening the door. "What brings you by?" He shifted nervously from foot to foot, his silver hair neatly combed, despite the early morning hour. "Well, Cordelia, I made too much tuna casserole last night, and I remembered Harold mentioning once that you liked tuna. Thought you might like some." It was a lie, and they both knew it. Harold had actually despised tuna, claiming it smelled like cat food. But Cordelia recognized the gesture for what it was, a lonely widower reaching out to a lonely widow. Both of them drowning in their oversized houses and undersized lives. "That's very thoughtful of you, Vance. Would you like to come in for coffee?" His face lit up like a child's on Christmas morning. "I'd like that very much." They sat at her kitchen table, Vance in Harold's empty chair, and talked for 2 hours. They discovered they both loved mystery novels, both missed the simple pleasure of cooking for someone else, and both had children who called dutifully once a week, but lived too far away to visit regularly. "It's funny," Vance said as he prepared to leave, "how you can be surrounded by people and still feel completely alone." Cordelia nodded, understanding exactly what he meant. Harold used to say that loneliness wasn't about being alone, it was about feeling disconnected from the world around you. After Vance left, Cordelia found herself humming while she washed the coffee cups. For the first time in months, the silence didn't feel quite so oppressive. 3 weeks after Vance's first visit, Cordelia made a decision that would change everything. She had been walking past the community center when she noticed a sign. New members welcome. Senior book club meets Fridays at 2 p.m. She almost walked by. Almost. But something, perhaps Harold's voice urging her to live, perhaps her own desperate need for human connection, made her stop and write down the information. Friday afternoon found her standing outside the community center's library, clutching a copy of the month's selection and fighting the urge to flee. She hadn't made a new friend in years. What if they didn't like her? What if she said something foolish? What if, "You must be our new member"? Cordelia turned to see a woman approaching, her arms laden with books and a bright smile on her weathered face. She appeared to be in her early 70s, with short silver hair and kind brown eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. "I'm Berenice Ashworth," the woman continued, "and you look like someone who's fighting the same battle I fought 5 years ago. The battle between staying home safe and lonely or taking a chance on making new friends." "Cordelia Whitmore," she replied, feeling some of her tension ease. "And you're absolutely right. I'm terrified." "Good," Berenice laughed. "Fear means you're about to do something that matters. Come on, let's go meet the others." The book club consisted of 8 members, ranging in age from 58 to 79. There was Thisbe Patterson, a retired teacher with a wicked sense of humor. Lester Quinlan, a former engineer who approached literature like a mathematical equation. And Nix Tremaine, a free-spirited artist whose late husband had been a jazz musician. They discussed the book, a romance novel about second chances, with passion and insight that surprised Cordelia. She had expected polite small talk, but these people engaged with literature the way she and Harold used to engage with life, fully, enthusiastically, and without apology. "The thing that bothers me about these books," said Thisbe, "is how they always make it seem so easy, like you just meet someone and fall in love, regardless of your age or circumstances." "But isn't that how it should be?" asked Nix. "Why should love be more complicated just because we're older?" "Because we have more baggage," Lester replied pragmatically. "More history, more fears, more physical limitations. Romance at our age isn't the same as romance at 20. "Maybe that's a good thing," Baroness interjected. "Maybe romance at our age is better because we know who we are. We're not trying to become someone else to please another person." Cordelia found herself nodding. "I think the real challenge isn't falling in love," she said quietly. "It's believing you deserve to fall in love again." The room fell silent, and Cordelia immediately regretted speaking. But then Baroness reached over and squeezed her hand. "That," Baroness said, "is exactly why you need to be in this group." As autumn turned to winter, Cordelia's Friday afternoons became the highlight of her week. The book club had become more than a literary discussion group. They had become friends, confidants, and cheerleaders for each other's small victories and daily struggles. It was during their December meeting, while discussing a particularly steamy romance novel that had left Lester blushing and Thisbe giggling like a schoolgirl, that Berenice made an announcement that would set Cordelia's life on an entirely new path. "I have a proposal," Berenice said, her eyes twinkling with mischief. "And before you say anything, hear me out completely." She pulled out a newspaper clipping from her purse. "There's a new dating service in town specifically for people over 50. They're hosting a meet and greet event next month at the Riverside restaurant. I think we should all go." The reaction was immediate and varied. Thisbe laughed so hard she nearly choked on her tea. Lester looked mortified. Nix clapped her hands in delight, and Cordelia felt her heart start racing. "Absolutely not," said Thisbe when she recovered. "I'm 69 years old. I'm not going to parade around like some desperate old woman looking for a man." "Who said anything about looking for a man?" Berenice countered. "What about looking for companionship, funship, someone to go to movies with or share a meal?" "I have friends," Lester protested. "Do you have someone to hold your hand during a scary movie?" Berenice asked gently. "Someone to dance with at weddings? Someone to travel with?" The questions hung in the air like morning mist, beautiful and uncomfortable at the same time. "I haven't danced in 3 years," Cordelia admitted quietly. "Harold and I used to dance in the kitchen while waiting for dinner to cook. I miss that. I miss having someone who cares if I come home late or worries when I'm sick." "Exactly," Berenice said. "This isn't about finding Prince Charming. This is about finding someone who makes life a little less lonely and a lot more fun." By the end of the meeting, 5 of the 8 members had agreed to attend the event. Thisbe, despite her protests, was one of them. "If I'm doing this," she declared, "we are all getting new outfits. And I mean new, not something from the back of our closets that we wore to our grandson's graduation." And so it was that Cordelia found herself, 2 weeks later, standing in front of her bedroom mirror, wearing a deep blue dress that brought out her eyes and made her feel, for the first time in years, like an attractive woman rather than just Harold's widow. The Riverside restaurant had been transformed for the evening. Round tables dotted the main dining room, each decorated with simple white flowers and soft lighting. A small jazz ensemble played in the corner, and a bar along one wall served wine and appetizers. The atmosphere was elegant but relaxed, designed, Cordelia realized, to make everyone feel comfortable rather than like they were at some sort of desperate singles event. She stood near the entrance with her book club friends, all of them looking slightly shell-shocked at actually having gone through with this plan. Thisbe kept adjusting her new red scarf, while Lester appeared to be having a serious conversation with himself under his breath. "Remember," Berenice said, "we're not here to find husbands. We're here to practice being social, to remember what it feels like to talk to new people, and maybe make some friends." "Easy for you to say," muttered Thisbe. "You look fabulous. I look like my grandmother dressed up for church." "You look beautiful," Cordelia assured her, and she meant it. There was something radiant about all of them, an energy that came from taking a risk, from stepping outside their comfort zones. A woman in her 60s approached their group, wearing a name tag that read, "Hello, I'm Zelda, event coordinator. You must be the book club ladies," she said with a warm smile. "Berenice mentioned when she registered that you were all coming together. I think that's wonderful. Having friends for support makes this so much easier." Zelda gave them a brief overview of how the evening would work. There would be a mixing hour where people could mingle freely, followed by a series of conversation rounds where everyone would spend 10 minutes talking with different people before moving to the next table. "The key," Zelda explained, "is to be yourselves. Don't worry about impressing anyone or saying the right thing. Just focus on having good conversations." As she walked away, Cordelia felt her palms begin to sweat. What if she couldn't think of anything to say? What if everyone else was more interesting, more charming, more ready for this than she was? "Cordelia," Berenice said softly, "what would Harold tell you right now?" She closed her eyes and could almost hear his voice. "Stop thinking so much, my love. Just be the wonderful woman I fell in love with all those years ago." "He'd tell me to stop overthinking and start enjoying myself," she replied. "Then let's do that." The first hour of mingling was surprisingly enjoyable. Cordelia found herself in conversations with a retired librarian who shared her love of mystery novels, a former teacher who regaled her with hilarious classroom stories, and a widowed doctor who spoke movingly about learning to cook for himself after 40 years of marriage. But it was during the structured conversation rounds that she met Roscoe. Roscoe Bellwether was 71 years old, with silver hair that curled slightly at his collar and laugh lines that spoke of a life well lived. He had been a high school English teacher for 40 years and had been widowed for 2 years when his wife lost her battle with cancer. "I have to confess," he said during their first 10-minute conversation, "I'm not really sure why I'm here. My daughter signed me up and practically pushed me out the door tonight." Cordelia laughed. "My book club friends did the same thing to me. I've been staring at my closet for 2 hours trying to figure out what one wears to these things." "Well, you chose perfectly," he said, and she felt herself blush like a teenager. They discovered they had both been married for over 30 years. Both missed having someone to share daily experiences with, and both felt slightly guilty about being at a dating event. "It feels like I'm betraying Margaret's memory," Roscoe admitted, "even though I know she'd want me to be happy." "Harold told me to live," Cordelia replied, "but I'm finding it's easier said than done." When the 10 minutes ended and they had to move to new partners, Cordelia found herself hoping she would get to talk to Roscoe again. She didn't see him again until the end of the evening, when she was saying goodbye to her book club friends in the parking lot. "Cordelia?" She turned to find Roscoe approaching, looking slightly nervous. "I was wondering," he said, "if you might like to have coffee sometime. Nothing fancy, just coffee and conversation." Her heart hammered in her chest. When was the last time a man had asked her on a date? The answer was 42 years ago, when Harold had nervously invited her to see a movie after they'd been introduced by mutual friends. "I'd like that very much," she replied. They exchanged phone numbers, and as Cordelia drove home, she realized she was smiling for the first time in months. Their first coffee date was scheduled for the following Tuesday at a small cafe downtown. Cordelia changed clothes 3 times before settling on a simple sweater and slacks, then spent an additional 20 minutes debating whether to wear the pearl earrings Harold had given her for their anniversary or the simple studs she bought herself. She arrived 5 minutes early and found Roscoe already there, seated at a corner table with 2 cups of coffee and what appeared to be a piece of apple pie with 2 forks. "I hope you don't mind," he said, standing as she approached. "I remembered you mentioning that you love apple pie, so I took the liberty of ordering us a slice to share." The thoughtfulness of the gesture and the fact that he had remembered such a small detail from their brief conversation touched her more than she expected. They talked easily about books, about their children. His daughter lived in California, his son in North Carolina, her son was in Texas, her daughter in Florida, about the challenge of filling retirement days with meaningful activities. "I volunteer at the Literacy Center twice a week," Roscoe said, "teaching adults to read. It's fulfilling, but there's still so many hours in the day. Margaret and I used to spend hours just talking about everything and nothing." "I miss that conversation." "Harold was the same way," Cordelia replied. "He could make a trip to the grocery store sound like an adventure. Everything was interesting to him." "Do you think," Roscoe asked carefully, "that it's possible to have that kind of connection again? Or is it something that only happens once in a lifetime?" It was a question Cordelia had been asking herself for months. "I don't know," she admitted, "but I'd like to find out." They met for coffee again the following week, and then the week after that. Each meeting felt more comfortable, more natural. Roscoe had a dry sense of humor that reminded her of Harold, but he was his own person. Gentler, perhaps, more thoughtful, with a deep love of poetry that led to long discussions about their favorite verses. But as their friendship deepened, Cordelia found herself facing unexpected emotional challenges. There were moments when Roscoe would laugh at something she said, and she would feel a pang of guilt, as if she were somehow betraying Harold's memory. There were nights when she would lie in bed, replaying their conversations, and feel both excited about this new connection and terrified of what it might mean. The guilt was the hardest part. How could she enjoy another man's company so much? How could she look forward to his phone calls, to seeing his face light up when she walked into the cafe? Did enjoying Roscoe's companionship mean she hadn't loved Harold enough? 3 weeks into her coffee dates with Roscoe, Cordelia was a mess of conflicting emotions. She found herself snapping at store clerks, crying at television commercials, and spending long hours staring at photos of Harold, searching his face for some sign of approval or disapproval. At the Friday book club meeting, her distress was obvious to everyone. "All right," Berenice said, after they had finished discussing the week's selection. "Something is clearly troubling you. Cordelia, would you like to talk about it?" And so Cordelia found herself pouring out her heart to her friends. The joy she felt when she was with Roscoe, the guilt that followed immediately after, the fear that she was somehow dishonoring Harold's memory by caring for someone else. "I feel like I'm cheating," she concluded tearfully. "Even though Harold is gone, how can I miss him so desperately and still enjoy being with Roscoe?" The room was quiet for a moment. Then Nick spoke up. "When my Charlie died," she said softly, "I thought my heart had been buried with him. But then, about a year later, I met someone at an art exhibition. Nothing romantic, just a nice man who appreciated the same kind of music Charlie and I had loved. We became friends, and I felt so guilty about enjoying his company that I stopped seeing him." "What happened?" Thisbe asked. "I was miserable," Nix replied. "And one night, I was looking through Charlie's things and I found a letter he had written to me before he died. One I was supposed to read later. In it, he wrote, 'Don't let your love for me become a prison. Love is meant to expand our hearts, not shrink them.'" Berenice nodded. "I think we make the mistake of believing that loving someone new diminishes our love for someone who's gone. But love isn't finite. The heart doesn't have a limited capacity." "Think about it this way," added Lester, surprising everyone with his emotional insight. "If Harold could see you now, would he want you to be happy or miserable? Would he want you to spend the rest of your life alone, or would he want you to find companionship and joy?" "He'd want me to be happy," Cordelia said without hesitation. "He always put my happiness above his own." "Then honor his love by allowing yourself to be happy," Thisbe said gently. "You're not replacing him. Cordelia, you're adding to your life. There's a difference." That night, Cordelia sat in her kitchen holding Harold's photograph and spoke to him aloud for the first time since his death. "I met someone," she told the picture. "His name is Roscoe, and he makes me laugh. He's kind and gentle, and he reads poetry. I think you would like him." She paused, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I'll always love you, Harold, always. But I think I might be able to love him, too. In a different way. Is that okay?" The house was silent, but Cordelia could swear she felt Harold's presence, warm and approving, surrounding her like a gentle embrace. The next day, Cordelia called Roscoe and asked if he would like to have dinner at her house instead of meeting for coffee. "I'd love to," he said, and she could hear the smile in his voice. "Can I bring anything?" "Just yourself," she replied, then added impulsively, "and maybe some of that poetry you're always quoting." She spent the day cooking Harold's favorite meal, pot roast with vegetables, fresh bread, and apple cobbler for dessert. As she cooked, she found herself talking to Harold, explaining what she was doing and why. "I'm not trying to replace our memories," she said as she kneaded the bread dough. "I'm just trying to make some new ones." Roscoe arrived at 6 o'clock sharp, carrying a bottle of wine and a slim volume of poetry. He stopped in the doorway, looking around her kitchen with appreciation. "It smells wonderful in here," he said, "and it feels like a home. Mine still feels like a museum." Over dinner, they talked about their marriages, their children, their hopes and fears for the future. Roscoe shared stories about Margaret's battle with cancer, how he had cared for her during those final months, how lost he had felt after her death. "I keep all her things exactly where she left them," he admitted. "Her reading glasses on the nightstand, her coffee cup in the sink. I know I should probably pack them away, but it feels like erasing her," Cordelia finished. "I understand. I still set 2 places at the table sometimes, out of habit." After dinner, they sat in the living room and Roscoe read to her from his book of poetry. His voice was rich and warm, and Cordelia found herself closing her eyes and simply enjoying the sound of another human being sharing something beautiful with her. When he finished reading, they sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Roscoe reached over and gently took her hand. "Cordelia," he said softly, "I need you to know something. I'm not looking for a replacement for Margaret, and I don't expect you to be someone other than who you are. I'm just grateful to have found a friend who understands what it's like to love someone deeply and lose them." She looked into his eyes and saw her own feelings reflected there. The mixture of hope and fear, excitement and guilt, longing and uncertainty that came with opening your heart again after such loss. "I'm scared," she whispered. "So am I," he replied, "but maybe we can be scared together." And then, very gently, he leaned over and kissed her forehead. It was barely more than a brush of lips against skin, but it was the first romantic touch Cordelia had experienced since Harold's death, and it made her feel both grateful and terrified. 2 months into their friendship, though it had clearly become something more than friendship, Cordelia decided it was time to tell her children about Roscoe. She had been dreading this conversation, unsure how her son David and daughter Patricia would react to the news that their mother was seeing someone. She called David first, reaching him at his home in Austin, where he worked as an engineer. "Mom, you sound different," he said after they had exchanged pleasantries. "Happier somehow." "Well, that's actually what I wanted to talk to you about," Cordelia said, her heart pounding. "I've met someone, a man. We've been spending time together, and I wanted you to know." The silence on the other end of the line stretched so long that Cordelia wondered if the call had been dropped. "David, are you there?" "Yeah, Mom, I'm here. I'm just surprised, I guess. Are you talking about dating?" "I suppose I am," she admitted. "His name is Roscoe, and he's a widower too. We met at a social event, and we've been having coffee together, and dinner occasionally. He's very kind, and I enjoy his company." Another pause. Then, "Mom, are you sure about this? I mean, it hasn't been that long since Dad died, and there are so many scammers out there who target older women." Cordelia felt a flash of irritation. "David, I'm 64 years old, not 94. I'm perfectly capable of judging character. And Roscoe is not a scammer. He's a retired teacher whose wife died of cancer 2 years ago." "I just don't want you to get hurt," David said, his voice softening, "or to make any hasty decisions you might regret." "What kind of decisions?" Cordelia asked, genuinely curious. "I don't know. Financial decisions or..." "God, Mom, you're not thinking about remarrying, are you?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Cordelia realized she hadn't even allowed herself to think that far ahead. "We're just friends, David. Companions. I'm not planning anything beyond enjoying his company." But even as she said it, she wondered if it was entirely true. Her call to Patricia went somewhat better. Her daughter, a social worker in Miami, seemed more understanding. "I'm glad you found a friend, Mom," Patricia said. "You've seemed so lonely since Dad died. What's he like?" Cordelia found herself smiling as she described Roscoe. His love of books, his gentle humor, the way he really listened when she spoke. "He sounds lovely," Patricia said. "I'd like to meet him sometime when I come for Christmas." "You would?" Cordelia was surprised by her daughter's openness. "Of course. Mom, you know Dad wouldn't want you to spend the rest of your life alone, right? He loved you too much for that." After hanging up, Cordelia felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. Her children's reactions had been about what she had expected: David's protective worry, Patricia's cautious support. But both responses made her realize that what she and Roscoe shared was becoming something that would need to be defined, explained, and defended to the people who mattered most to her. It happened 3 weeks later over something ridiculously small. They were having dinner at a new restaurant Roscoe had suggested, and Cordelia had ordered the salmon, while he chose the chicken. When their meals arrived, Roscoe noticed that Cordelia's fish looked particularly good and asked if he could try a bite. Of course, she said, and cut him a piece. That's delicious, he said, then added casually, Margaret always ordered the salmon when we came here. She had excellent taste in food. It was an innocent comment, the kind of casual reference to a deceased spouse that was inevitable in any relationship between two widowed people. But something about the way he said it, the nostalgic tone, the slight smile, made Cordelia feel suddenly invisible. You came here with Margaret? She asked, trying to keep her voice neutral. Oh yes, this was one of our favorite places. We celebrated our anniversary here several times. He took another bite of his chicken, seemingly unaware of the tension building across the table. I thought you'd enjoy it too. Cordelia felt a wave of emotions she couldn't quite name. Hurt? Jealousy? Confusion? So you brought me to a place where you made romantic memories with your wife? Roscoe looked up, finally noticing her expression. Cordelia, I didn't think. It's just a restaurant. It's not just a restaurant, she said quietly. It's a place where you celebrated your marriage, where you built memories with the woman you loved for 40 years. And now you've brought me here, to the same table, to order the same meal she used to order. I don't understand why you're upset, Roscoe said, his own voice beginning to show strain. Margaret is gone. I'm here with you. But are you? Cordelia asked. Or are you here with me while thinking about her? Am I supposed to feel honored that I'm eating salmon in the same restaurant where you used to take your wife? The argument escalated from there, with both of them saying things they didn't mean, touching on fears and insecurities that ran deeper than restaurant choices. Cordelia accused Roscoe of using her as a substitute for Margaret. He accused her of being unreasonably jealous of a woman who could no longer be a threat to anyone. They left the restaurant separately, both angry and hurt. For 3 days, they didn't speak. Cordelia replayed the argument obsessively, alternating between feeling justified in her anger and mortified by her behavior. She had acted like a jealous teenager, she told herself. But then she would remember the look on Roscoe's face when he talked about Margaret ordering the salmon, and the hurt would return. On the 4th day, her phone rang. Cordelia, Roscoe's voice was quiet, tentative. I've been thinking about what happened at dinner, and I owe you an apology. I owe you one too, she replied. I overreacted. No, he said firmly. You didn't. I was thoughtless and insensitive, and I hurt you. The truth is, I did bring you there because it was a place Margaret and I enjoyed, and I thought that made it special. But what I failed to realize is that you deserve your own special places, your own memories, not hand-me-downs from my previous life. Cordelia felt tears welling up in her eyes. I was jealous, she admitted. Jealous of a woman who died 2 years ago, which makes me feel petty and small. It doesn't make you petty, Roscoe said gently. It makes you human. Cordelia, can we try again? Can we find new places to go, new things to do together, places that will be ours? I'd like that, she whispered. Good, he said, and she could hear the smile returning to his voice. Because I found this little Italian place on the other side of town that neither of us has ever been to, and I'd very much like to take you there for dinner tomorrow night. Their first fight, painful as it was, marked a turning point in their relationship. They both became more conscious of the need to create their own traditions, their own special places and rituals that belonged only to them. They started taking walks in a park neither had visited before, began attending concerts at a music venue that was new to both of them, and discovered a shared love of old movies at a restored theater downtown that showed classic films every Sunday afternoon. But it was the small daily rituals that meant the most. Roscoe started calling Cordelia every morning at 9 o'clock, just to say good morning and ask about her plans for the day. She began leaving little notes in the books she lent him, sharing her thoughts about passages that moved her. He brought her flowers every Friday, not because it was what he used to do for Margaret, but because Cordelia had mentioned loving the smell of fresh flowers in the house. 6 months into their relationship, Cordelia invited Roscoe to attend her book club meeting as her guest. She was nervous about introducing him to her friends, worried about how the group dynamic might change, but she needn't have been concerned. Roscoe fit in perfectly, engaging thoughtfully with the book discussion and charming everyone with his knowledge of literature and his gentle humor. After he left, the book club members couldn't stop talking about how happy Cordelia seemed. "You're glowing," Thisbe told her. "It's like someone turned on a light inside you." "Is it that obvious?" Cordelia asked, blushing. "Only to people who care about you," Berenice replied, "which is all of us." But the real test came when Patricia visited for Christmas. Cordelia had been anxious about the meeting for weeks, coaching Roscoe on Patricia's interests and warning him about her protective streak. "Just be yourself," she finally told him. "If she can't see how wonderful you are, that's her loss." The meeting went better than either of them had hoped. Patricia was charmed by Roscoe's stories about his teaching career and impressed by his obvious devotion to her mother. Over Christmas dinner, she pulled Cordelia aside. "I like him, Mom," she said. "He's nothing like Dad, but that's probably good. You need someone who can love you for who you are now, not for who you were 40 years ago." "You really think that?" Cordelia asked. "I think Dad would approve," Patricia replied, "and I think you deserve to be happy." Spring came early that year, and with it, a conversation that had been building for months. Cordelia and Roscoe were sitting on her back porch, watching the sunset and sharing a bottle of wine, when he brought up the subject of the future. "Cordelia," he said carefully, "I've been thinking about us, about where this relationship is going." Her heart began to race. Were they about to have the talk? But one about commitment? About what they meant to each other? About whether this friendship had become something more? "What have you been thinking?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "I've been thinking that I love you," he said quietly. "Not the way I loved Margaret. That was a different kind of love, built over decades of shared youth and raising children and growing old together. This is something new. A love that comes from choosing each other, from deciding that even after loss and heartbreak, we're brave enough to try again." Cordelia felt her breath catch. They had been dancing around this word for months, both of them feeling it, but neither quite ready to say it. "I love you too," she whispered. "It terrifies me, but I do." "Why does it terrify you?" he asked, reaching for her hand. She considered the question carefully. "Because loving you means accepting that my life isn't over, that there are still chapters to be written. For the past 3 years, I've been living like my story ended when Harold died. But if I love you, if we have a future together, then I have to start living again instead of just existing." "And that scares you?" "It terrifies me," she admitted, "but not as much as the thought of going back to being alone." They sat in silence for a while, holding hands and watching the sky fade from pink to purple to deep blue. Then Roscoe spoke again. "I've been thinking about asking you to move in with me," he said, "or about moving in here. I'm tired of maintaining 2 houses, 2 sets of everything. I'm tired of saying goodnight to you at the door and going home to an empty house." Cordelia's mind raced. Living together. It was such a big step, one that would require explanations to their children, adjustments to their routines, decisions about whose furniture to keep and whose to donate. What would people think? She found herself asking, then immediately felt foolish for caring. "They'd think we're 2 adults who found companionship and happiness," Roscoe replied. "And if they think anything else, that says more about them than about us." "My son would have a fit," she said. But she was already imagining what it would be like to wake up next to someone again, to have coffee with someone every morning, to never eat dinner alone. "My daughter would probably be relieved," Roscoe said. "She worries about me being isolated." They talked until well past midnight, discussing practical matters and emotional ones, fears and hopes and dreams for their remaining years. By the time Roscoe left, they had decided to think about it for a month before making any decisions. Living together, they discovered, was both easier and harder than either had expected. The practical aspects were relatively simple. They decided that Cordelia's house was in better condition and had a nicer kitchen, so Roscoe would move in with her. They spent weeks sorting through belongings, deciding what to keep, what to donate, and what to store. Some decisions were easy. They didn't need 2 sets of dishes or 2 lawnmowers. Others were more complicated, like what to do with the photographs of their deceased spouses. "I don't want you to feel like you're living in a shrine to Harold," Cordelia said, as they discussed where to put the wedding photos and anniversary pictures that had decorated her mantelpiece for years. "And I don't want to feel like I'm erasing Margaret from my life," Roscoe replied. They solved the problem by creating a memory corner in the study, a small table where they could display photos of Harold and Margaret, along with other mementos that were important to them. It felt respectful without being overwhelming, a way to honor their past while embracing their present. The emotional adjustments were more challenging. After decades of marriage, followed by years of widowhood, both Cordelia and Roscoe had developed particular ways of doing things. She liked to read in bed until late at night. He preferred to be asleep by 10. He enjoyed watching the news during dinner. She found it depressing. She squeezed the toothpaste tube from the middle. He rolled it neatly from the bottom. "I feel like I'm 25 again," Cordelia confessed to her book club friends after a week of minor bickering over household routines. Learning how to compromise, how to share space with someone. The difference, Berenice pointed out, is that at 25, you were trying to figure out who you were while building a relationship. Now you know exactly who you are. You just have to figure out how to be yourselves together. It was good advice. Instead of trying to change their habits to accommodate each other, they began finding ways to honor both of their preferences. Roscoe watched the news in the living room while Cordelia prepared dinner. Then they ate together without the television. Cordelia read in the guest room when she wanted to stay up late, joining Roscoe in bed when she was ready to sleep. 8 months after moving in together, they faced their first real crisis. Roscoe began experiencing dizzy spells and shortness of breath. What started as occasional episodes became daily occurrences. And finally, after Cordelia found him sitting on the bathroom floor one morning, unable to stand without help, she insisted they go to the emergency room. The diagnosis was heart disease. Not immediately life-threatening, but serious enough to require medication, lifestyle changes, and regular monitoring. The good news, the cardiologist explained, is that we caught it relatively early. With proper treatment, there's no reason you can't continue living a full, active life. But you'll need to take this seriously. Medication every day, regular exercise, a heart-healthy diet. As they drove home from the hospital, Cordelia felt a familiar terror gripping her chest. She had already nursed one husband through illness and death. Could she do it again? Did she want to? Was she strong enough to watch another man she loved struggle with his mortality? "You're very quiet," Roscoe said as they sat in her kitchen, the prescription bottles lined up on the counter like small soldiers. "I'm scared," she admitted. "Harold's heart attack came without warning. At least we didn't have to watch him decline. But this might mean you have to take care of me eventually," Roscoe finished. "I understand if that's not what you signed up for." Cordelia looked at him, really looked at him. He seemed smaller somehow, more fragile than he had that morning. But he also seemed like the same man who read her poetry, who brought her flowers, who made her laugh even when she was being difficult. "None of us signs up for illness," she said finally, "but we sign up for each other. That's what love means at our age, isn't it? Knowing that time is precious and choosing to spend it together anyway." "Are you sure?" he asked. "Because I'll understand if—" "Roscoe Bellwether," she interrupted, "are you trying to get rid of me?" "Never," he said, smiling for the first time that day. Then, We'll figure this out together. That's what partners do. Managing Roscoe's heart condition became part of their daily routine. They started taking morning walks together, gradually building up his stamina and strength. Cordelia learned to cook heart-healthy meals, discovering new recipes and finding that she actually enjoyed the challenge of making food that was both good for them and delicious. They established a new evening ritual. After dinner, they would sit together while Roscoe took his medications, and Cordelia would read to him, sometimes poetry, sometimes news articles, sometimes chapters from whatever book her book club was currently discussing. The health scare had an unexpected side effect. It clarified their priorities and deepened their commitment to each other. They stopped worrying about what other people thought of their relationship and started focusing on making the most of whatever time they had together. I used to think that love at our age was just about companionship, Cordelia told Patricia during one of their weekly phone calls. But I was wrong. It's about choosing to be vulnerable again, choosing to risk loss because the alternative, living without love, is worse than the possibility of heartbreak. That's very wise, Mom, Patricia replied, and very brave. I don't feel brave most of the time, Cordelia admitted. I feel terrified, but Roscoe makes me want to be brave. 2 years after moving in together, on a crisp October afternoon, while they were walking through the park where they had shared so many conversations, Roscoe stopped suddenly and turned to face Cordelia. I have something to ask you, he said, his voice slightly breathless, whether from emotion or exertion, she couldn't tell. Are you feeling dizzy? She asked immediately, reaching for his arm. Do you need to sit down? I'm fine, he laughed. Well, I'm nervous, but I'm fine. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Cordelia Whitmore, will you marry me? She stared at the box, then at his face, feeling the world tilt slightly around her. Marry you? She repeated. I know it might seem crazy, he said quickly. I know we're both old enough to know better, and I know our children might think we've lost our minds. But I love you, and I want to spend whatever time I have left being your husband, not just a roommate. Cordelia felt tears beginning to flow down her cheeks. Roscoe, I don't know what to say. Say what you're feeling, he urged gently. Whatever that is. What was she feeling? Joy, terror, excitement, confusion, all of it swirling together in her chest, like leaves caught in a whirlwind. I'm feeling like a schoolgirl and a grandmother at the same time, she said finally. I'm feeling like this is the craziest thing anyone has ever asked me, and also like it's the most natural thing in the world. Is that a yes? He asked hopefully. That's a yes, she said, and then she was in his arms, both of them laughing and crying at the same time. Planning a wedding in your 60s, they discovered, was both simpler and more complicated than planning one in your 20s. Simpler because they knew exactly what they wanted, a small ceremony with close friends and family, focused on the commitment rather than the spectacle. More complicated because everyone, their children, their friends, even their doctors, had opinions about whether two people their age should be getting married. David's reaction was the most difficult to handle. Mom, I just don't understand why you need to get married, he said during a tense phone conversation. You're already living together. What's the point of a wedding at your age? The point, Cordelia replied with more patience than she felt, is that I want to be his wife, not his girlfriend. I want to make a public commitment to love and care for him for whatever time we have left. But what about the practical considerations? Medical decisions, inheritance, all of that? We've discussed all of that with a lawyer, she assured him. David, I need you to understand something. I'm not asking for your permission. I'm asking for your blessing. There was a long pause. Then quietly, if this is what makes you happy, Mom, then you have it. Patricia's reaction was more enthusiastic, though she had her own concerns. I'm thrilled for you, she said. But Are you sure you want a big wedding? Wouldn't something small and private be more appropriate? Why? Cordelia asked. Because we're old? Because this is our second marriages? Patricia, this is just as much a celebration of love as any other wedding. Maybe more so, because we know how precious and fragile love can be. Roscoe's children had similar reactions, a mixture of happiness, concern, and confusion about their parents embarking on marriage at this stage of life. But gradually, as they saw how happy and devoted Cordelia and Roscoe were, both families came around to supporting the decision. They were married on a Saturday afternoon in May, in the same park where Roscoe had proposed. The ceremony was small, just 25 guests, including their children, grandchildren, and the members of Cordelia's book club. Berenice served as Cordelia's maid of honor, while Roscoe's son stood as his best man. Cordelia wore a simple blue dress, not white, which felt wrong for a second marriage, but a soft periwinkle that brought out her eyes. Roscoe wore a new suit and the tie Cordelia had given him for Christmas, the one with tiny books printed on it. The ceremony itself was brief but meaningful. Instead of traditional vows, they had written their own, speaking honestly about the unique challenges and gifts of finding love later in life. Cordelia, Roscoe said, his voice steady despite his obvious emotion, I promise to love you not as a replacement for what I've lost, but as a gift I never expected to receive. I promise to make new memories with you while honoring the memories we've both brought to this relationship. I promise to be grateful every day that we found each other when we did. Roscoe, Cordelia replied, I promise to love you with a heart that has been broken and healed, with a wisdom that comes from experience, and with the knowledge that every day together is a blessing. I promise to be your partner in whatever adventures await us, for however long we're blessed to share them. There wasn't a dry eye in the small gathering as they exchanged simple gold bands and sealed their vows with a kiss. The reception was held at the community center where they'd first met at the book club social event. They danced to songs from their youth, ate cake, and listened to toasts from their children and friends. But the most touching moment came when Thisbe stood up to speak on behalf of the book club. 2 years ago, she said, Berenice dragged us all to a dating event that most of us attended reluctantly. We thought we were too old, too set in our ways, too damaged by loss to find love again. Cordelia and Roscoe proved us wrong. They showed us that love doesn't have an expiration date, that it's never too late to take a chance on happiness, and that the heart doesn't become less capable of love as we age. It becomes more discerning about what real love looks like. Being married, they discovered, felt different from living together, even though their daily routines remained largely the same. There was something powerful about the public commitment they had made, something that deepened their connection and their sense of being a true partnership. They celebrated their first anniversary by taking a cruise, something neither had ever done, but both had always wanted to try. They spent lazy days reading on the deck, exploring ports of call, and marveling at the fact that they had found love and adventure at an age when many of their peers were resigned to quiet routine. I feel like we're getting away with something, Cordelia said one evening as they watched the sunset from their cabin balcony. What do you mean? Roscoe asked. I mean, everyone expects people our age to be winding down, preparing for the end. But I feel like I'm just beginning a whole new chapter of my life. Maybe that's what love does, Roscoe suggested. Maybe it makes every stage of life feel like a beginning instead of an ending. They had been married for 3 years when Roscoe's heart condition worsened. What started as increased fatigue progressed to more serious symptoms that required hospitalization and adjustment of his treatment plan. I'm not going anywhere yet, he assured Cordelia as they sat in the cardiac unit, surrounded by monitors and medical equipment. But we should probably talk about what you want to do when I do. It was a conversation they had been avoiding, but one that couldn't be postponed indefinitely. I want to take care of you for as long as I can, Cordelia said firmly. And when the time comes, I want to be holding your hand. And after that, he asked gently. She considered the question seriously. After that, I want to live, really live, not just exist, but live fully and joyfully, the way you've taught me to do. That would be the best way to honor what we've had together. 5 years into their marriage, Cordelia and Roscoe had become something of a local legend among their peers. Other widows and widowers sought them out for advice about dating, about remarriage, about finding love after loss. What's the secret? A woman at their senior center asked during a discussion about relationships in later life. Cordelia and Roscoe looked at each other and smiled. They had discussed this question many times. I think the secret, Cordelia said, is understanding that love at our age is different from love at 20 or 30. It's not about passion and intensity, though those can still exist. It's about choosing each other every day, knowing that time is precious. And it's about being honest about what you bring to the relationship. Roscoe added, we both brought baggage, grief, health concerns, established habits, complicated family relationships. But we also brought wisdom, self-knowledge, and the ability to appreciate what we have. The biggest lesson, Cordelia continued, is that you can't love someone new until you've made peace with loving someone who's gone. I had to learn that loving Roscoe didn't diminish my love for Harold, and that honoring one relationship didn't mean betraying another. A man in the group raised his hand. But how do you know when you're ready? How do you know if you're looking for love or just looking to fill a void? You're probably both, Roscoe replied honestly. And that's okay. Loneliness is a valid reason to seek companionship. But if that's all you're looking for, someone to fill empty time and empty space, then you're not really ready for love. Love requires being willing to be vulnerable again, to risk heartbreak again. And it requires being willing to be yourself, Cordelia added. Not the person you were in your first marriage, not the person you think someone else wants you to be, but who you actually are right now, at this stage of your life. And so, dear listener, that is Cordelia's story. 8 years have passed since she first walked nervously into that community center for the book club meeting that changed her life. 8 years since she took the terrifying step of opening her heart to love again. Cordelia and Roscoe are still married, still learning about each other, still choosing love every day, despite the inevitable challenges that come with age and time. Roscoe's heart condition requires careful management, but it hasn't stopped them from traveling, from hosting dinner parties for their book club friends, from dancing slowly in their kitchen while dinner cooks. They have navigated the deaths of friends, the marriages of grandchildren, and the ongoing adjustments that come with aging bodies and changing circumstances. Through it all, they have maintained what they discovered in those early days of their relationship, that love doesn't become less possible as we age. It simply becomes more precious. Their story has taught me, and I hope it has taught you, several important lessons about love after 60. First, that grief and love can coexist. You don't have to stop loving someone who has died in order to love someone who is living. The heart has infinite capacity for love, and honoring one relationship doesn't require sacrificing another. Second, that love at our age requires courage. The courage to be vulnerable again, to risk loss again, to believe that we deserve happiness regardless of our age or circumstances. It's easier to stay safe in our loneliness than to risk the potential heartbreak that comes with opening our hearts again. Third, that late-in-life love brings unique gifts. When you love someone at 60 or 70 or 80, you bring to that relationship all the wisdom and self-knowledge you've accumulated over a lifetime. You know who you are, what you want, and what truly matters. This can make for deeper, more authentic connections than the passionate but often confused relationships of youth. Fourth, that companionship is not a consolation prize. Too often, We think of late life relationships as settling for friendship, when what we really want is romance. But true companionship, the deep pleasure of sharing daily life with someone who understands you, who makes you laugh, who is interested in your thoughts and dreams, is one of life's greatest gifts. Finally, that it's never too late to write new chapters in your life story. Cordelia thought her story ended when Harold died. Instead, she discovered that it was simply time to turn the page and begin a new chapter, one filled with different adventures, but no less meaningful than what had come before. I'm often asked if I ever considered looking for love again myself. The honest answer is yes, I have considered it. Watching Cordelia's journey has made me realize that at 70, I still have years of living ahead of me, and that those years could be enriched by the right kind of companionship. But I've also learned that you can't find love by looking for it desperately. Love finds us when we're living fully, when we're engaged with life and open to possibility. Whether that happens for me or not, I'm grateful to have witnessed Cordelia and Roscoe's love story and to have learned from their example that it's never too late to take chances on happiness. If you're listening to this story and recognizing yourself in Cordelia's early loneliness, I encourage you to remember that your story isn't over yet. Whether you're 50, 60, 70, or beyond, there are still chapters to be written, still possibilities to be explored, still chances for joy and connection and love. The heart doesn't retire. It doesn't become less capable of feeling deeply, of connecting authentically, of finding beauty and meaning in relationship. What changes as we age is not our capacity for love, but our wisdom about what love really means. So be brave, be open, be willing to take chances on happiness, even if those chances feel scary. The alternative, a life closed off to possibility, is far more frightening than the risk of heartbreak. After all, as Cordelia learned, the heart that has been broken and healed is often stronger and more capable of love than the heart that has never been tested. And love, at any age, is always worth the risk. Thank you for listening to this story of love, loss, and second chances. May it inspire you to remain open to the possibilities that life continues to offer, regardless of your age or circumstances. Remember, your story isn't over until your last breath. And every day is an opportunity to choose love, hope, and connection. Until we meet again, this is Margaret, wishing you all the courage to write beautiful new chapters in your own love story.